Okay, so this is for lesson 8.1. This is our first chapter with equations. Okay, the top here is just a little bit of a refresher. This is things that your book assumes that you remember from last year, is solving one-step equations. Okay, something new that I have this year is that when I go to solve, I'm going to put in my lines. I call these railroad tracks. The reason being is as I go through, my equal sign stays within those lines, and that helps me when I say something like what you do to one side, you do to the other. That splits up my side. Here's one side, here's the other side. One side, the other side. Okay? So you're always trying to isolate your variable. The variable, remember, is the letter that represents an unknown number. This is an equation. An equation means now that there's an equal sign instead of being an expression. The answer that we find for x, that's going to be called our solution. And as we try to isolate our variable to find the solution, we have to use our inverse operations. What that means is I'm trying to undo this plus 1/2. So in order to undo it, I have to do the opposite, or my inverse operation. The inverse would be subtracting it. Because if I have it and I take it away, that cancels it out. And on that side, all that's left is x. But if I do something to one side, our properties of equality say if I do something to one side, I have to do it to the other to keep it balanced. So 17 divided, or I'm sorry, minus 0.5 would be 16.5. That's our answer. One good thing about this is you can always double check by plugging that value back in for x. You wouldn't even have to write it out if you don't want to, but if I use my calculator and I say, okay, x, we found it 16.5 plus that 1/2, did it equal 17? Yep, so I know my answer is correct. The next one. To isolate t, I need to get rid of the minus 10. The opposite of subtracting 10 is adding 10. So t is equal to, well, negative 20 plus 10, that's going to be a negative 10. Again, I could type it in and check. A negative, remember, is this button right here on your calculator. So negative 10 is t minus 10. And when I hit equals, it should equal negative 20, which it does. My answer is correct. Notice, these are both constants, numbers by themselves, without the variable right next to it, or right with it. For constants, you can use adding and subtracting to get rid of the constant. When you have coefficients, these are both considered coefficients because they're right with the variable. That's going to be multiplying and dividing. Here, since we're multiplying, the opposite would be to divide by 3. So 9.6 divided by 3, you would get your 3.2. And again, if I want to check it, I just do 3 times that answer, and I get 9.6. The next one, since it's divided by 4, we multiply. When you go to write this, you want to make sure that you're writing your multiplying by 4 at the top, because if I multiply it down here, that would just be d over 16, and that doesn't cancel anything out. We want 1 to be on the top and 1 to be on the bottom, so we're really reading it as 4 divided by 4 to cancel each other out, because that would just give me a 1, so 1d, we would only write d here. If I multiply by 4 on this side, I have to multiply by 4 on that side. And 8 times 4 is 32. Again, I could double check this by typing in 32 divided by 4 and see if it equals 8, and it would. So that's all review from last year. The new stuff looks like this problem. This has got it 1D. If you want to go into your notes and look at that, you can look at the examples beforehand if you'd like to. But today it's all about rational coefficients. Rational means that they're going to be decimals and fractions. So here is a rational coefficient. You want to make sure that you're always finding where your variable is first, because that tells you what you have to get rid of. It won't help me at all to get rid of this because I'm trying to get z by itself. So I need to get rid of this number. Now, one common mistake is that people would add 13.2, but we're not going to add that because this is a coefficient, not a constant. That means this is multiplication here, so my opposite thing to do is divide. And remember, what I do to one side, I have to do to the other. So negative 13.2 divided by negative 13.2 is just going to be 1. So that's just z. And on the other side, 323.4 divided by negative 13.2 would give me negative 24.5. Now, this is not technically a wrong answer, but when we get into inequalities in this chapter, you are going to want to make sure your variable comes first. So we might as well practice now with rearranging it so your variable's first in your answer. Okay? That just means keep the equal sign here, just flip-flop the two sides. Now, there are a couple story problems, and in the story problems, you can look at those. Story problems, really, it's just practicing with writing equations. One thing they don't talk about, though, in your notes is defining a variable. So in the problem, the first one, let me get it quick. That example 2 that they gave, it says a drive-through Safari Zoo charges $12.50 per person for admission. In 1 hour, the park raised $675 in admission fees. So they want us to write an equation to solve for how many people visited that hour. So when you go to solve, you have to put in what your variable is. And typically we pick a variable that stands for something in the story problem. So in this one, if you're going to use P, you'd want to say P is for people. Or in the problem they used V for visitors. Now, you and the person next to you don't have to use the same variable, but they have to be talking about the same thing. So if you wanted to be really specific and say visitors, you could. If you want to say P for people visiting the zoo, that's fine too. Okay? So, and in that problem, they went through then, and that $12.50 per person, well, that's 12.50 times the amount of visitors equals that total amount they earned, and then they solved. Okay, but they skipped the part of defining the variable. I guess they did show that, but they didn't make it known that you have to do that, okay? So just something to note. And then the next problem that we have is 3B on the got it's. So we've done one with a decimal coefficient. Now we have one with a fraction coefficient, okay? Again, it's really important to notice where your variable is, because I don't want to do anything with this number. That's not going to help me solve. I want to get rid of this number. To get rid of a fraction, what we are going to do is we're going to multiply by the reciprocal. Remember, reciprocal means we flip it. And the reason for that is because now I have a 7 on the top and a 7 on the bottom. Those cancel. I have a 6 on the top and the bottom. Those cancel. So all I have left on that side is m. Now on the other side, I can multiply straight across and simplify, or you can simplify first. I know 7 divided by 7 is 1, 14 divided by 7 is 2. I also know that 6 divided by 3 is 2, and negative 3 divided by 3 is a negative 1. Don't leave your negative out there. So now when I multiply straight across, negative 1 times 1 is negative 1, and 2 times 2 is 4. So my answer would be negative 1/4. I can still go back through and check. 6/7 times negative 1/4 should equal negative 3/14. And I can do that in my head, or grab your calculator. 6/7, remember it's 6 right here's your fraction button. It's at AB/C sevenths times, and I'm going to put it in parentheses since there's a negative. Don't forget, down here is your negative button. Don't use the minus sign. -1 fraction button 4, close the parenthesis, and notice that is our answer, so that one works. Okay, so that was just a brief overview giving you 2 examples of what your homework will kind of be looking like. Let me know if you have any questions and I'll be glad to help.